Sound of cheerful music, laughter, and a splash. Visual sun-drenched suburban backyard. A group of friends laughing by a sparkling pool. The camera pulls back, focusing on a face pressed against a window. Eyes narrowed with seething rage. Karen, VO, low. Menacing. I'm going to make sure this fun stops. Permanently. Visual. Night falls. A faint click is heard. A security camera's green light blinks on. The image shifts to a grainy black and white feed. A shadowy figure creeps toward the pool. Alex, VO, horrified whisper. I thought she just wanted to sue me. I was wrong. Quick cut to a freeze frame of the figure's face, a twisted smirk in the pale moonlight. The sun was a golden hammer, beating down on the sparkling surface of the pool, turning the water into a shimmering liquid mirror. Alex had spent the better part of 3 years making this backyard his personal sanctuary, a concrete and chlorine oasis where the pressures of his 9-to-5 dissolved into the sound of laughter and the sizzle of burgers on the grill. It was a Friday afternoon, the official launch of summer, and the atmosphere was pure, unadulterated joy. A dozen of his closest friends were scattered around the deck, some floating on neon-colored rafts, others tossing a beach ball, their voices a symphony of carefree abandon. Then the shadow fell. It wasn't a cloud, but the angular, rigid form of his neighbor, Karen. She stood at the edge of his property line, arms crossed over a pristine white linen top, her expression a masterclass in passive-aggressive disdain. The music, a playlist carefully curated for maximum chill, seemed to die a sudden, jarring death replaced by a tense, heavy silence. Mr. Harding, she said, her voice cutting through the humid air like shattered glass. This is the third noise complaint I've had to make this month. The third. I've been more than patient, but my patience, unlike your music, has reached its limit. Alex, who had been grilling a perfectly seasoned slab of steak, turned to face her, his smile a forced, strained thing. Karen, it's a Friday afternoon. We're just having some friends over. It's not even that loud. It's not just the noise, she said, her gaze sweeping over his friends with the condescending swiftness of a seasoned hawk. It's the general atmosphere, the decadence, the constant flow of strangers on a private residential street. I can't open my windows without hearing your frivolity. This is a family neighborhood, not a public swimming club. A few of Alex's friends exchanged nervous glances. They knew the drill. Karen wasn't just a neighbor. She was a force of nature, a self-appointed warden of suburban decorum. Last summer, she had threatened to report a lawn gnome that was obscene and had once called the police because Alex's dog, a fluffy golden retriever named Gus, had barked at a squirrel. I'm sorry you feel that way, Alex said, his tone still polite, but a thread of steel beginning to weave its way into his words. But I'm well within my rights. The music is below the decibel limit for this time of day, and my friends are not causing any trouble. Karen stepped a foot over the property line, a bold, defiant move that felt like a declaration of war. I have documentation, photos. I have consulted with my attorney, and he tells me I have a solid case for nuisance and property depreciation. Your constant pool parties are not only disturbing the peace, but are actively lowering the value of my home. She paused, a glint of pure malice in her eyes. I'm giving you one last chance to cease this behavior, or I will be forced to pursue legal action. The summons will be at your door before the week is out. With that, she turned on her heel and retreated into the sterile quiet of her house. The party, once buoyant, felt deflated. The easy laughter was gone, replaced by a lingering unease. Dude, is she for real? His friend Jake asked, shaking his head. Alex let out a long, heavy sigh. Unfortunately, yes. She's been like this since I moved in. Every little thing is a federal offense to her. The summer unfolded under the pall of her threats. The casual pool parties became tense affairs, with Alex constantly checking his watch, the decibel meter on his phone, and the fence line for any sign of Karen. The threat of a lawsuit was a phantom weight on his shoulders, a constant low-level anxiety that stole the joy from his days. He started getting weird, anonymous emails from a burner account with photos of his friends' cars parked on the street. A week later, he found a perfectly straight, deliberate scratch down the side of his own car. He reported it to the police, but without any proof, there was nothing they could do. The officer, a kind but weary man, just shook his head. "Sounds like a neighborly dispute, son. Get some cameras. It's the only way to protect yourself these days." Alex tried to reason with her again. He knocked on her door, a peace offering in hand, a fresh batch of his famous lemon bars, but she didn't even open it. Her voice, tinny and cold through the intercom, said, "I have nothing to say to you, Mr. Harding. I've already advised my legal counsel." The final straw came on a Tuesday. Alex was simply washing his car in his driveway with the radio playing softly when Karen once again materialized. She wasn't just complaining this time. She was filming him with her phone, her lips moving silently as if narrating his perceived transgressions. "This is getting out of hand," he told his girlfriend Sarah that night. "She's not just a loud complainer anymore. She's actively harassing me. I'm afraid to even do yard work." "She's clearly escalating," Sarah said, her brow furrowed with concern. "You have to do what the officer suggested. You need proof, not just for a lawsuit, but to protect yourself. You don't know what she's capable of." The next day, Alex went to a security store. He didn't want a full-blown surveillance system. That felt too paranoid. He wanted something small, discreet, that he could use to document Karen's harassment in his yard. He settled on a tiny, weather-resistant hidden camera, disguised to look like a small decorative garden gnome, a poetic, ironic touch. He placed it in a flower bed near the edge of his property, its wide-angle lens pointed squarely at the fence line. He'd check the footage every morning, a chore he hoped would be boring and repetitive, documenting nothing but Karen's occasional glares and perhaps a few more passive-aggressive notes. That night was quiet. The air was cool and still, a welcome relief from the day's oppressive heat. Alex lay in bed, the low hum of the AC a soothing backdrop, feeling a sense of unease that the cameras would soon alleviate. He fell asleep wondering what new drama the footage would bring. He woke up the next morning, made a pot of coffee, and sat at his kitchen island, his laptop open. He inserted the camera's memory card, a knot of dread tightening in his stomach. He wasn't expecting anything particularly dramatic. Maybe a quick video of her standing at the fence, talking on her phone, or a grainy shot of her leaving a note on his mailbox. He fast-forwarded through the early evening, seeing nothing. Then he came to a timestamp just after midnight. A figure emerged from the shadows of Karen's house. It was her, clad in dark sweatpants and a long-sleeved shirt, her face obscured by the low angle and the darkness. Alex leaned closer to the screen, his heart beginning to pound a slow, heavy rhythm. He thought she was just prowling the property line, but she wasn't. She was moving with a purposeful, silent gait, not along the fence, but towards the pool. He watched, breathless, as she crept to the edge of the water. She wasn't looking at the pool. She was looking down at something in her hand. She knelt down, and with a swift, fluid motion, she sprinkled a handful of white powder into the water. The camera feed, in its grainy black and white, couldn't show him what it was, but the act itself was beyond chilling. It was a secret, calculated violation. Alex's hand flew to his mouth, a gasp escaping him. He zoomed in on her face, and that's when he saw it. A small, triumphant smirk, a flash of pure, unadulterated pleasure as she watched the powder dissolve into the water. He had prepared for a legal battle, for a civil dispute. He had not prepared for this. The camera's hidden gaze had not captured a neighbor's anger, but a hidden malicious act, a secret that went far beyond mere complaints. It was an act of quiet chemical vengeance. The video ended there, a silent, damning piece of evidence of a crime he couldn't yet calm. The video ended, but the silent, damning footage of Karen kneeling by the pool and scattering the unknown powder into the water replayed in Alex's mind on an endless, horrifying loop. The knot in his stomach had become a cold, hard stone. It wasn't a neighborly dispute. It wasn't about noise or property values. This was deliberate, malicious. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so violently he almost dropped it. The first person he called was Sarah. Her voice, thick with sleep, was instantly replaced with sharp concern as he stammered out what he had just seen. "I'm coming over. Now," she said, her voice a sharp command. She arrived 10 minutes later, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear as she watched the footage. The triumphant, chilling smirk on Karen's face in the final freeze frame made her visibly recoil. "Alex, what did she put in there?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "What if it was corrosive? What if someone had been swimming?" The unspoken fear hung in the air between them. What if the party had gone on just one more night? The thought sent a jolt of ice through Alex's veins. He looked out the window at the now innocent-looking, shimmering blue water, and suddenly it seemed menacing, a beautiful trap. His sanctuary, his safe place, had been violated in the most intimate, insidious way. "We have to call the police again," Sarah said, her voice firming with a steely resolve that Alex lacked in that moment. "We have undeniable proof this time." They went to the station later that morning, the tiny memory card a monumental weight in Alex's pocket. They were directed to a small, windowless interrogation room where they waited for what felt like an eternity before the same weary officer from the previous week, Officer Miller, came in. He was a man who had seen too many petty disputes to be impressed by a grainy video. Alex began to explain, his words tumbling over each other in his rush to convey the gravity of the situation. "It's my neighbor, Karen. She's been harassing me for months about my pool parties, and now I have her on video. She put something in my pool at night." Miller nodded slowly, his expression neutral. "You say you have video evidence?" Alex handed him the memory card. Miller put it into a small card reader and pulled up the footage on a monitor. The three of them watched it in silence. When it was over, Miller leaned back in his chair, his expression still inscrutable. "All right. We have a video of a person whom you identify as your neighbor, adding an unknown substance to your pool." He paused, looking directly at Alex. "Do you know what the substance is?" "No, it's just a white powder," Alex said, the frustration beginning to bubble up. "But she did it in the middle of the night. What else could it be but something harmful? Why else would she do that?" Miller's gaze was sympathetic but firm. "Mr. Harding, without knowing what the substance is, this is just suspicious activity. It's not criminal mischief, it's not assault, and it's certainly not attempted murder. It could be flour, it could be baking soda, it could be pool shock, which is a common maintenance item. I can't go to her door and arrest her for suspiciously sprinkling baking soda. But she's been threatening me. She said she was going to sue me. She scratched my car. She's been harassing me," Alex pleaded, his voice rising in exasperation. "I understand that. And we have that all on file," Miller said, leaning forward. "This video is good. It's a piece of the puzzle, but it's not the whole picture. For this to go anywhere, you need to know what she put in that water. You need to get that water tested, and you need to get that done as soon as possible. As it stands, it's a civil issue, not a criminal one." Their hopes, which had been so high just an hour ago, were dashed. They left the station with the memory card back in Alex's pocket, the video feeling less like a smoking gun and more like a frustrating, impotent piece of evidence. The system, it seemed, wasn't built for subtle, neighborly malice. It was built for clear-cut crimes, and until Alex could prove one had been committed, he was on his own. The drive home was quiet. The silence was filled with the deafening hum of their frustration. "He's right," Sarah finally said, her voice low. "We have to get it tested. We can't let her get away with this. Not after seeing that." She gestured back to his house. That afternoon, Alex began the meticulous, soul-crushing process of draining the pool. The pump whirred to life, a low, constant drone that was a stark contrast to the lively, cheerful sound of his pool parties. The water, once a source of joy, now felt toxic and tainted. He watched it disappear down the drain, each gallon a testament to his lost sense of security. It was a physical and emotional chore, and as the waterline receded, he felt the weight of his anger and helplessness grow heavier. Midway through the process, a familiar, crisp voice cut through the sound of the pump. "My goodness, Mr. Harding. Is everything all right?" Alex turned. Karen was standing on her side of the fence, a delicate teacup held in one hand. The scene was perfectly, maliciously staged, the serene, concerned neighbor asking about the commotion. Her face was a mask of flawless, feigned innocence. He straightened up, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow. The pump whirred on, a low, angry witness. "I'm draining the pool, Karen," he said, his voice flat, devoid of its usual polite pleasantries. "Oh, what a shame," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "It's such a beautiful day for a swim." "Is something wrong with the filtration system?" Alex took a step closer to the fence, his body rigid with fury. He held up his phone, the screen showing a still frame from the video, a magnified shot of the white powder she had just added to the water. "I think you know exactly what's wrong with it." "I have you on video, Karen. I saw what you did last night." Her mask didn't slip. Not for a second. Her smile remained a thin, patronizing line. She didn't look at the phone. She looked him directly in the eyes, and a terrifying, cold calm settled over her features. "I'm afraid I have no idea what you're talking about, Mr. Harding. I was home all night. Are you feeling all right? You seem a little unhinged." "Don't play dumb," Alex growled, taking another step forward. "I have proof. It's on camera." "Proof of what?" she scoffed, a flicker of something dark and dangerous finally igniting in her eyes. "Proof that you're harassing me? That you're delusional? I warned you, Mr. Harding, this sort of slander will be added to my lawsuit. Defamation of character. You think you're a victim, but you're the one who needs a reality check. You have no idea what you're getting yourself into." She didn't raise her voice, but her words were laced with a venom that made Alex's blood run cold. She was not just denying it. She was turning the tables on him, framing his pursuit of justice as an act of aggressive insanity. She knew he had no idea what the powder was. She was confident, assured in her malicious act. She took a final theatrical sip from her teacup, her eyes a pair of dark, gleaming pinpricks. "Enjoy your empty pool, Mr. Harding," she said, her voice like ice. With a flick of her wrist, she turned and walked back into her house, leaving him standing there in the sun, the sound of the pump droning on, feeling utterly defeated. The lab technician finally called 2 days later. Alex had been checking his phone obsessively, his mind a battlefield of scenarios. Harmless chalk, pool shock, maybe a highly acidic substance. He was so consumed by the waiting he was barely eating or sleeping. When the call came, he nearly dropped the phone. "Mr. Harding, we have the results back on your water sample," the technician's voice said, professional and sterile. "The preliminary analysis indicates a significant presence of sodium thiosulfate. At these concentrations, it's a very effective dechlorination agent." "You said you added it to the pool, correct?" Alex's mind raced. He had never added that. He hadn't added anything. The police officer's words echoed in his head. It could be pool shock, a common maintenance item. The technician's words seemed to confirm it was harmless. A wave of relief, followed by a crushing, soul-sickening disappointment, washed over him. It was a chemical used for pools. Karen hadn't committed a crime at all. It was just an extremely weird, passive-aggressive act of... What? Trying to mess with his water balance? It wasn't malicious in the way he thought. All this fear, all this work, all this emotional torment, for nothing. She hadn't tried to poison his friends, so... "It's harmless?" Alex asked, his voice hollow. "Like it just takes the chlorine out?" "Essentially, yes. It's used to remove chlorine from water for a number of reasons. You can get it at any pool supply store. It's harmless to people, so long as the levels aren't extreme and the pool is properly maintained afterward. It just causes an imbalanced chemical state." The technician's words were a cold, hard slap of reality. The case was closed before it even started. He hung up the phone, the world a dull, monochrome gray. His anger was gone, replaced by a profound, debilitating exhaustion. He had proof of her doing something, but the what was so trivial, so anticlimactic, that it made him feel foolish. It was a cruel, perfect form of torture. She hadn't poisoned his pool, she had just poisoned his sanity. He felt a deep sense of shame and defeat. He had nothing. No case, no justice. He was standing in his backyard, a massive, empty hole where his happiness used to be, defeated not by an assault, but by a perfect, calculated prank. He looked out at Karen's house, a sense of quiet despair settling over him. He had nothing. She had won, but then his phone buzzed. It was a text from the lab technician. "Just got the fin." The lab report was a cold, hard bullet of truth. It wasn't a random act of spite. It wasn't a childish prank. It was a surgical strike. The sodium thiosulfate, a red herring, had been a smokescreen for the real poison, a highly specific anti-corrosion agent. He scrolled back to the line that made his blood run cold. Toxic to aquatic life, specifically copper and zinc-based algae. Karen hadn't been trying to hurt his friends. She had been trying to kill his pool. He knew this compound was the perfect antidote to the very specific, good kind of anti-algae tablets he had just added to the water, the ones she had watched him install, her phone camera documenting every single move. The defeat that had been a crushing weight on his shoulders was instantly incinerated by a white-hot, righteous rage. This was not about his pool parties. This was a premeditated, calculated assault on his personal property, a campaign of psychological warfare waged with chemical precision. Her feigned innocence, her theatrical teacup, her smug dismissal of his unhinged accusations, it was all a performance, a meticulously crafted lie designed to make him question his own sanity. Alex didn't call the police, not yet. He knew Officer Miller's weary, skeptical face would look at the report and see a convoluted mess of technical jargon and a neighborly dispute. He had to build an airtight case. He had to show not just what she did, but why she was able to do it with such perfect, horrifying accuracy. He and Sarah became detectives in their own home. They spent the next 2 days reviewing every hour of the security footage from the hidden camera. It was a grueling, mind-numbing process of fast-forwarding through mundane footage of squirrels, birds, and the occasional mail carrier. But they started to notice a pattern. On the days he worked on the pool, adding chemicals, cleaning the filter, adjusting the pH, Karen was always there. Not at the fence, not in his sight, but a shadowy figure in the corner of the frame. A flash of white linen, a hand holding a phone, a brief flicker of movement behind her blinds. They found the video from 2 weeks prior. Alex was out in the yard, holding up the bottle of his new anti-algae tablets, reading the label. The camera, from its low angle, caught her at her kitchen window, her phone held to the glass, its lens zoomed in on the bottle in his hand. The focus was so tight, the pixels so sharp, that they could make out the brand name. It was chilling. She hadn't just been filming him. She had been gathering intelligence. She had been studying his habits, his purchases, his routine, all to plan this moment of quiet, devastating sabotage. "It's not just the pool," Sarah said, her voice tight with a newfound dread. "She's watching us." "All the time." "The scratch on your car. She probably figured out your schedule. The fake emails. She knows you, Alex. She knows you and she hates you with a burning passion." The final piece of the puzzle came on a video from the night before she poisoned the pool. The footage, shaky and dark, showed Karen a full hour before her main attack. She crept out to the pool, a small dark object in her hand. She dipped it into the water and then moved back toward her house. Alex and Sarah zoomed in. The object was a small bottle, the kind used for sample collection. She hadn't just been scoping out the pool to see if it was empty. She had taken a water sample, analyzed it, and then purchased the perfect counteragent. Her attack had been calculated with the cold, hard logic of a chemist. That night, Alex slept on the couch, the memory card clutched in his hand. He hadn't just found proof of her crime. He had found proof of her meticulous, terrifying dedication to hurting him. The next morning, a Monday, he drove to a different police station, in a different jurisdiction, one that Karen's lawyer wouldn't be able to influence with a simple phone call. This time, he brought not just the video, but the lab report with a separate page of highlighted chemical names and their purpose. He also brought a detailed, meticulously organized timeline of Karen's harassment, with dates, times, and corresponding video footage. This time, the officer was a young, sharp-eyed woman named Detective Riley. She listened to Alex's story with a quiet intensity, her face giving away nothing. She watched the entire timeline of footage. When she saw the video of Karen taking the water sample and then the video of her adding the compound, she didn't roll her eyes. Her expression hardened. "This is not a civil dispute," she said, her voice low and direct. "This is a clear-cut case of criminal mischief and premeditated property damage. The evidence is solid. And frankly, this level of planning, it's disturbing. A wave of profound, soul-deep relief washed over Alex. He hadn't been crazy. He wasn't paranoid. He was finally being heard. Riley asked him to file a restraining order and told him she would be visiting Karen later that afternoon. He left the police station feeling lighter than he had in months. The weight was finally off his shoulders. The case was in the hands of the law. As he drove home, he felt a sense of vindication. Karen's reign of terror was over. The justice he so desperately sought was finally within reach. He drove past her house, a sense of smug satisfaction creeping up on him. Her carefully manicured facade was about to come crashing down. He pulled into his driveway, got out of his car, and for the first time in months, felt completely, gloriously safe. But then, he saw it. There was a note taped to his front door. It wasn't written on a crisp white envelope with her pristine handwriting. It was a single crumpled sheet of paper. His name was scrawled on it in a panicked, shaky hand. He tore it off the door, his heart beginning to pound with a new, unwelcome rhythm. The note wasn't from Karen. It was from an elderly woman named Mrs. Peterson, his neighbor on the other side. He had known her for years. Her husband had passed away last spring, and she was a reclusive, gentle woman. The note read, "Alex, I saw Karen come over last night. She was acting strangely. She had a bag with her. I don't know what she did, but she was smiling in a way that scared me. I think you need to check your mail." A new wave of cold dread washed over him. The police were a few hours away from confronting her. What had she done last night? He ran to his mailbox, his hands fumbling with the lock. He pulled out the usual junk mail and a single, official-looking letter. The return address was unfamiliar, but the logo was not. It was from the city's public health department. The letter was addressed to him, and it was a formal notice of a full property inspection. The complaint listed was from an anonymous party claiming they had witnessed him dumping unregulated hazardous waste into his sewer system. A complaint that had been filed and formally accepted that very morning. The inspection was scheduled for tomorrow. He crumpled the notice in his hand, a horrifying realization dawning on him. Karen hadn't known about the cameras. She hadn't. The crumpled notice from the public health department felt like a death sentence. The ink was dark, the language formal and cold. Alleged dumping of unregulated hazardous waste into city sewer system. The inspection was scheduled for tomorrow. This was no longer a personal feud or a police matter. This was the city, a faceless bureaucratic hammer about to fall on his life. Karen hadn't just retaliated, she had escalated. She was 2 moves ahead, anticipating his victory lap, ready to drop a new bomb just as he thought he was safe. His phone slipped from his numb fingers and clattered onto the driveway. He didn't bother picking it up. He just stood there, the reality of her meticulous, horrifying planning washing over him in a freezing wave. He thought he had her checkmated. He was a fool. This was not a chess match. It was a war, and she had just proved she was willing to burn the whole board down to win. Sarah, who had been waiting for his call, ran out to the driveway a minute later, her face a mask of concern. She found him staring at the letter, his face ashen. She read it, and her gasp was a sharp, audible thing in the suburban silence. "How?" she whispered, her mind racing. How could she even do that? What evidence could she possibly have? A single horrifying thought broke through Alex's paralysis. The car! She had to have done it with the car. They ran inside to the hidden camera footage. This time they weren't looking for a person. They were looking for an act. They scanned the footage from the day he washed his car, the day of the strange anonymous scratch. There it was. He scrubbed the car, the sudsy gray water flowing down his driveway toward the gutter. And then, a moment later, a figure emerged from the shadows of Karen's house. It was her, clad in dark clothes, a small, inconspicuous bottle in her hand. She wasn't near the pool this time. She was at the end of her driveway, just feet from the storm drain that collected the runoff from Alex's property. She knelt and with a small, furtive gesture poured a dark, oily liquid from the bottle into the stream of water. It was a minuscule amount, a single toxic-looking plume of black that instantly dissipated into the flowing water and vanished down the drain. The whole act lasted less than 5 seconds. But it was there, On film, the police had dismissed the car scratch as a petty act of vandalism. Alex had taken it as a simple act of aggression. But it wasn't. It was the setup. It was a malicious bait designed to force him to wash his car and create a stream of runoff for her to contaminate. The anonymous complaint about unregulated hazardous waste wasn't a lie. It was a meticulously crafted half-truth, built around an act she had committed. She had used his own property to frame him. The full weight of her malice hit him like a physical blow. She wasn't just a malicious neighbor. She was a criminal mastermind, a sociopath who planned her attacks with the chilling precision of an assassin. She had taken a water sample from his pool to poison it, and she had waited for the perfect moment to poison his reputation with the city. Alex's mind raced. "We have to show this to Detective Riley right now." They downloaded the video clip and raced back to the police station. This time, there was no waiting. Detective Riley saw the fire in their eyes and led them straight into her office. They played the clip for her, their hands shaking as the black, oily plume swirled down the gutter. Riley watched it twice, her expression unreadable. When the video was over, she leaned back in her chair and sighed, a long, weary exhalation. Her level of premeditation is off the charts. It's like she had a plan for every possible outcome. She had your car keyed, knowing you would wash it. She had the complaint ready to go, and then she planted the evidence. She didn't even care about the pool, not really. That was just a test run. She was escalating the whole time. This is a whole new level of criminal behavior. "What do we do?" Alex asked, his voice strained. "The inspection is tomorrow. The city could shut down my water, my sewer, fine me into oblivion." Riley's expression hardened. "We have her. We have more than enough. I'll send a patrol car to her house now. With this video and the lab reports, it's a slam dunk. We'll get a warrant to search her property. I have a feeling we'll find a lot more evidence of her handiwork." She picked up her phone and made the call. Alex and Sarah sat in stunned silence as Riley relayed the address and the details of the complaint. Within minutes, they heard the distant wail of a police siren, a sound that grew louder and louder. Justice was coming. It was finally, truly on its way. Alex and Sarah drove back home in a state of suspended animation. The fear that had been their constant companion for months was beginning to lift. The sirens wailed in the distance, a sweet, victorious song. He watched the headlights of the patrol car turn down his street. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated triumph. But as the patrol car pulled up to Karen's house, Alex noticed something strange. The lights in her house were all off. The porch light was dark. The curtains were drawn. It was a dark, empty monument to her defeat. The patrol car pulled into her driveway. Two officers got out, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. They walked up to her door, one of them knocking loudly. There was no answer. The officer knocked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Alex's feeling of triumph began to curdle into a cold, sick sense of unease. He had expected a confrontation, a screaming match, a defiant Karen, her lawyer on speed dial. Not this, not silence. The police officer at the door tried the doorknob. It was unlocked. The officer pushed the door open, just a crack, his flashlight beam disappearing into the blackness. He called out her name. "Karen?" "Police." No answer. Just as the officer was about to step inside, a sound cut through the silence. Not a scream, not a shout. It was a single, definitive, sickening sound that shattered the stillness of the night. A glass bottle breaking against a hard surface, followed by a series of frantic, hurried footsteps. The officer swore and pulled out his radio, calling for backup. The sound came from the back of the house, the part that faced the pool. Alex looked from the police at her front door to the dark, silent expanse of his own backyard. The light from his porch was just bright enough to illuminate the edge of his pool, now half empty and exposed. And as the police stormed around her house, a new, far more sinister revelation dawned on him. Karen hadn't just planted a new bomb. She had been destroying the last of the evidence. And now she was doing it in a way that would take down not just him, but her too. The sound of shattering glass was an exclamation mark on the suburban silence. It was a sound of panicked desperation, of a plan gone wrong. The two police officers at Karen's front door swore and immediately radioed for backup, their flashlights now two frantic beams cutting through the gloom. They ran around the side of her house, past the meticulously trimmed hedges and the perfectly manicured flower beds, towards the source of the noise. Alex and Sarah watched, transfixed, from the shadowy safety of his yard. The distant wail of more sirens grew louder, a chorus of justice racing toward a moment of reckoning. The officers found the back door ajar. A single broken vial lay on the pristine patio tiles, its contents, a dark, viscous liquid, spreading like a stain on the concrete. The smell was sharp and acrid, like burnt sugar and metal. It was a smell Alex had never smelled before, and he knew with a gut-wrenching certainty that it was not from a pool store. The officers, one of them pulling out his radio to report the possible presence of a hazardous substance, stepped inside. They found Karen in her living room, her face contorted with a desperate animal fury. She was not destroying evidence. She was destroying everything. She stood over a small, portable filing cabinet, frantically stuffing handfuls of paper into a small, portable fireplace. She had a gas can by her feet, its cap already off. When the police officers burst in, she shrieked, a sound of pure, unadulterated rage and defeat. She wasn't just a neighbor anymore. She was a woman on the verge of total, irreversible collapse. The officers secured her, pinning her to the ground and cuffing her as she thrashed and screamed. As they did so, one of them shined his flashlight into the fireplace. The papers had not yet caught fire. They were notebooks, journals, and binders, filled with her meticulous, spidery handwriting. On the top page of one open binder, Alex saw a sketch of his backyard. His pool was drawn in perfect detail, with chemical symbols scrawled next to it. Below the sketch was a timeline of his pool parties. The phrase Operation Wet Blanket was underlined 3 times. The officers pulled her from the house, her frantic screams of protest giving way to whimpers of self-pity as her perfectly manicured world came crashing down. The true horror, however, came later. Detective Riley and a forensics team arrived and began to sweep Karen's property. They found what Alex and Sarah could not have possibly imagined. The hazardous waste that she had put into the storm drain wasn't a single black liquid. It was a series of meticulously planned chemical reactions. The dark liquid was a specific blend of industrial solvents. In her basement, they found a small hidden chemistry lab. Beakers, vials, pH meters, and a detailed handwritten logbook. The logbook wasn't about his pool. It was a journal of her entire campaign against him. It documented the day she moved in, the day she saw his first pool party. The pages were filled with her twisted logic, her sociopathic observations. She hadn't just hated his noise, she had hated his joy. His happiness was an affront to her perfectly controlled, sterile existence. The pool wasn't a nuisance. It was a symbol of everything she detested: spontaneity, community, happiness. It was an island of chaos in her sea of order. She didn't want to just stop his parties. She wanted to destroy the source of his happiness, piece by piece. The scratched car, the tainted pool, the fabricated public health complaint. Each act was a calculated experiment, a test of her ability to inflict pain and control. They found more evidence of her twisted obsession. Photos of Alex's friends, with their names and license plate numbers scrawled on the back. Meticulously detailed maps of their street, with arrows pointing to the precise locations of her surveillance. The police even found a series of threatening, anonymous notes, written in a shaky, disguised handwriting that had been meant for Alex, but which she had kept as trophies. She had been collecting evidence against him, just as he had been collecting evidence against her. But her evidence was a catalog of her own crimes. In the end, Karen wasn't charged with simple criminal mischief or property damage. She was charged with felony stalking, attempted environmental contamination, and multiple counts of criminal property damage. She was not just a disgruntled neighbor. She was a dangerous, unhinged individual who had orchestrated a campaign of terror with the chilling precision of a scientist. She had documented her own malice, and it was her own painstaking, meticulous work that sealed her fate. She had planned for every contingency, except one, the hidden camera that saw it all. and the quiet witness who had the courage to expose her. A week later, Alex stood in his backyard, his empty pool now just a shell of its former glory. The police investigation had left it a mess, a canvas of chalk outlines and footprints. But for the first time in months, he felt truly, completely free. He could sit by his window without looking over his shoulder. He could listen to music without reaching for the volume knob. He could walk his dog Gus without worrying about a call to animal control. The first repair crew came the next day, and the sound of their tools was a welcome noise. It was the sound of something being rebuilt, a life being put back together. The final act of justice wasn't a court hearing or a jail sentence. It was the moment Alex felt safe enough to start over. He would fill the pool again, he would throw parties again, and he would fill his backyard with the sounds of laughter. He had been a victim, but in the end, his simple desire for a little bit of joy was the one thing Karen's twisted plan could never destroy.